Sometimes you walk past someone on the street and you just feel something, a little pull, a sadness you can't explain. But life is busy, right? We look away. We hurry on. We have our own problems. That's what everyone else was doing that day. They saw the old man sitting on the pavement, his back against a cold brick wall, and they just kept walking. He was almost invisible. Another forgotten soul in a bustling city. I almost did too. I really did. I was 17. Heading home from school, my mind full of homework and what my friends were saying online. Just another Tuesday. He was huddled in a worn-out army jacket, even though the afternoon sun was still warm. His face was hidden mostly, tucked down into his collar. His hands were rough, resting on his knees. People flowed around him like water around a rock. No one met his eyes. No one offered a coin or even a kind word. My heart gave a little squeeze. It always did when I saw people who seemed lost or alone. Maybe it was how my mom raised me, always telling me to look deeper, to see the person, not just their situation. But usually that squeeze was followed by a pang of helplessness. And then, I'd keep walking too. Ashamed maybe, but unsure what else to do. But that day was different. As I got closer, something made me slow down. It wasn't just the usual feeling of pity, it was something else. Something sharp. My eyes snagged on his jacket. It was old faded green, the kind you see in old war movies. But it wasn't just any jacket. On the sleeve, almost hidden by grime and wear, was a patch. A small embroidered insignia. My breath caught in my throat. My steps faltered. I stopped. People behind me muttered, bumping past. I didn't care. I couldn't take my eyes off that patch. It showed a bird, a hawk, maybe, inside a broken circle. It was faded, threads missing, but I knew it. I'd seen it before. My heart started pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. That patch, it belonged to my grandfather's old unit. The unit he served with decades ago. The unit he never came home from. My grandfather. The man I only knew from grainy photographs and hushed family stories. He was listed as missing in action, presumed dead. A hero, my grandma always said, her eyes clouding over. But the details were always vague, lost to time and pain. And here, on this busy city street, was an old forgotten man wearing that patch on his jacket. My feet felt glued to the pavement. My mind raced. Who was this man? How did he have this jacket? Was it just a coincidence? An old surplus store find? It had to be, right? But something told me it wasn't. A feeling deep inside, urgent and insistent. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. I looked around. Everyone was still rushing past, caught in their own worlds, completely oblivious. It was just me and him, and this impossible connection hanging in the air. I had to know. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him. He didn't look up at first. "Excuse me," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin, quivery. He flinched, then slowly raised his head. His eyes met mine. They were pale blue, clouded with age and something else. Sadness, fear, deep, deep exhaustion. His face was deeply lined, covered in gray stubble. He looked lost. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was rough, like gravel. Not unkind, just tired, wary. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice again. "Your jacket," I stammered, pointing with a trembling finger. "The patch, on your sleeve." He instinctively looked down at his arm, his brow furrowing. He touched the faded insignia gently, almost reverently. "What about it?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly, watching me. "My grandfather," I said, the words tumbling out now. He was in that unit, a long time ago. He didn't come back." The old man's reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't look confused or dismissive. Instead, a wave of something unreadable washed over his face. His eyes widened, just a fraction. He stared at me, really seeing me for the first time. The weariness seemed to lift for a second, replaced by a spark of intense focus. He leaned forward slightly. "Your grandfather," he repeated, his voice softer now, laced with disbelief. What was his name?" I told him. "Sergeant Michael Carter." The name hung in the air between us. The sounds of the city seemed to fade away. The old man's face crumpled. He visibly sagged against the wall, his eyes closing for a moment, as if struck. He took a ragged breath. When he opened his eyes again, they were glistening. Mikey, he whispered. The name was full of an old raw pain. I knew him. I served with him. My world tilted. It wasn't a coincidence. This stranger, this forgotten man on the street, knew my grandfather. The grandfather my family had mourned for decades. The hero whose story always felt incomplete. Tears pricked my own eyes. You knew him. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant, lost in memories. Yeah, I knew him. Good man. Brave man. He paused, his throat working. He saved my life. My breath hitched. Saved his life. The family story was just that he went missing on a mission. No details, no saved lives mentioned. Just, gone. What happened? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. They told us he went missing. Presumed dead. The man looked down at his rough hands, turning them over slowly. He seemed to wrestle with himself. The wary look returned to his eyes. It's complicated, he said finally. A long time ago. Doesn't matter now. It matters to me, I insisted, feeling a surge of desperate need. It matters to my family, please. We never knew what really happened. He looked up at me again, searching my face. He saw the tears, the pleading in my eyes. He sighed, a long shuddering sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. It wasn't like they said, he murmured, his voice low, secretive. The official report, it wasn't the whole truth. Suspense tightened its grip around my chest. Not the whole truth. What did that mean? What were they hiding? Who are you? I asked softly. He hesitated for a long moment, then, he seemed to make a decision. The name's Joe, Private Joseph Miller, back then. He offered a small sad smile. Most folks just call me Joe now, if they call me anything. Joe. He knew my grandfather. He knew the truth. Can you tell me? I pleaded. Please. Joe. He looked around nervously, as if the ghosts of the past were listening from the bustling street. Not here, he said quickly. Too many ears. Too much. He seemed overwhelmed, suddenly fragile. Okay, I said, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was racing. Where? When? He looked lost again. I don't know. I don't really stay anywhere long. My heart sank. He was homeless, vulnerable. How could I find him again? What if he just disappeared? The chance to know the truth about my grandfather, dangling right in front of me, felt terrifyingly fragile. Look, I said, making a quick decision. There's a coffee shop just around the corner. It's quiet, can we go there? I'll buy you something warm, please. He hesitated, looking down at his worn clothes, then back at me. Maybe he saw the genuine desperation in my eyes. Maybe he was just tired of being alone with his memories. All right, kid, he said slowly, nodding. All right, just for a little while. Getting him up was harder than I thought. His body was stiff, his movements slow. I offered him a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. His grip was surprisingly strong, but his hand was freezing cold despite the sun. Walking into the warm, bright coffee shop felt strange. People glanced at Joe, their eyes lingering on his clothes, his weathered face. I felt a flash of anger at their judgment, but I ignored it, guiding Joe to a quiet table in the corner. I bought him a large coffee and a muffin. He cradled the warm cup in his hands like it was treasure, taking slow, grateful sips. He ate the muffin quickly, ravenously. Watching him, my heart ached. How long had it been since he'd had a proper meal, or someone to just sit with him? He finished eating, and a little warmth seemed to return to his face. He looked more present, less haunted. So, he said, looking at me over the rim of his cup, Mikey Carter's granddaughter. He shook his head slightly. Never thought I'd see the day. Please, Joe, I urged gently, tell me what happened. He took another deep breath. All right, but you gotta understand, war is ugly. Things happen. Things get covered up. And then he started to talk. His voice was low, sometimes cracking with emotion, sometimes sharp with remembered fear. He painted a picture of a brutal jungle, a mission gone wrong, not just wrong, disastrous. They were ambushed, cut off, outnumbered. Communications were down, panic set in. The official story, he said, was that their patrol had been overrun, and Sergeant Michael Carter was lost in the chaos, missing in action. But that ain't how it was, Joe said, his knuckles white as he gripped his empty cup. We were trapped, pinned down. They were gonna wipe us all out. We were kids, most of us, scared out of our minds. He paused, his eyes looking far beyond the coffee shop walls. Mikey, your grandfather. He wasn't the ranking officer, but he took charge. He was steady, kept us calm when no one else could. What did he do? I whispered. Joe's eyes met mine, and they were filled with a terrible ancient grief. He saw a way out, a narrow path through the enemy line, but someone had to distract them, draw their fire, give the rest of us a chance to break through. My blood ran cold. I knew where this was going. Before anyone could argue, Joe continued, his voice thick. Mikey volunteered, said he'd lay down covering fire, told us to run, to not look back. He gave his rifle to the kid next to me, told him he'd need it more. Mikey only kept his pistol and a couple of grenades. Tears were streaming down my face now, silent and hot. We argued, Joe choked out. Tried to stop him, but he shoved us toward the path. Go, he yelled. Get out of here. Tell them, tell my family I love them. Joe had to stop, wiping his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. We ran, he finally managed to say. We could hear the gunfire behind us. Explosions. Mikey, he held them off, long enough for most of us to make it back. But he didn't. So he died saving you? I asked, my voice trembling. Joe nodded. He died a hero, a real hero. But when we got back, battered and broken, the story changed. Changed how? The commanding officers, they didn't want a story about a disastrous ambush, about them losing control. They didn't want questions about why a sergeant had to make that kind of call. So they simplified it. Patrol ambushed. Sergeant Carter missing in the firefight. Easier, cleaner, less blame. Joe spat the last word out like poison. They lied. I breathed, shocked. They omitted. Joe corrected bitterly. They buried his bravery under paperwork. Said it was too confusing. The situation too chaotic to confirm details. Easier to just list him as MIA. We were ordered to stick to the official story, threatened with consequences if we didn't. He looked down again. I was young, scared. I had just seen horrors, and I saw my friend die. I kept my mouth shut. We all did. But it ate at me, every single day since. He looked up, his eyes pleading for understanding. Knowing the truth, knowing Mikey died saving me, saving us, and his family never knew. It broke something inside me. I came home, but I was never really home. Carried it with me, tried to drink it away, couldn't hold down jobs, lost my family, ended up here. He gestured vaguely, encompassing his current life on the streets. The jacket, I prompted gently. It wasn't Mikey's, he clarified. It was mine, from back then, kept it all these years. Sometimes it feels like the only real thing I have left, a reminder. He touched the patch again. A reminder of him, and what I didn't do. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his story filling the small space between us. My grandfather wasn't just missing. He was a hero who had sacrificed everything, whose true story had been deliberately hidden, and this man, Joe, had carried the burden of that truth, the guilt of that sacrifice, for nearly 50 years. It had destroyed his life. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his rough, trembling one. It wasn't your fault, Joe, I said softly but firmly. You were kids. You were scared. You survived. He looked at me, tears tracking paths through the grime on his cheeks. But his family never knew, he whispered. His wife, his kids. My grandma passed away a few years ago, I told him quietly. But my mom, his daughter, she needs to know this. My uncle too. They need to know he didn't just disappear. They need to know what he really did. Joe searched my face again, then slowly nodded. Yeah, he said. Yeah, they do. He reached into an inner pocket of the old jacket. My breath caught again. What now? He pulled out something small, wrapped in a faded piece of cloth. Carefully, he unwrapped it. Resting in his palm were a pair of old dented dog tags. These were his, Joe said, his voice thick with emotion. Mikey's. He gave them to me, right before, told me, if you make it, give these back to them. I tried finding his family when I first got back, but I was a mess, and scared of the official story. Then time just slipped away. I kept them safe though, always. He gently pushed the dog tags across the table towards me. They belong with his family. I picked them up with trembling fingers. Michael Carter, his serial number, his blood type, a tangible link to the grandfather I never knew, handed to me by the man he saved. It felt incredibly heavy, sacred. "Thank you, Joe," I whispered, clutching the tags tightly. "Thank you." Suddenly I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about hearing the story, it was about Joe, too. He'd carried this for too long. "Joe," I said, my voice clear now, decided. "You're not going back out there tonight. We need to tell my family, together, and we need to get you some help." He looked startled, then wary again. "Help? Kid, you're the man my grandfather saved." I cut him off gently. "You're the one who kept his memory safe, who kept his dog tags safe. Your family, in a way, we owe you, and my grandfather would want us to help you." Tears welled up in Joe's eyes again, but this time, they looked different. Maybe, hopeful. Getting my parents to understand took time. There was disbelief at first, caution. Who was this man I'd brought home from the street? But when I showed them the dog tags, when Joe, cleaned up a bit, and looking less haunted, haltingly told his story, matching details we knew with ones we didn't, they started to believe. My mother cried, holding the dog tags, tracing the name of the father she barely remembered. It was a different kind of grief now, still painful, but mixed with pride and closure. My uncle flew in the next day, and listening to Joe, he finally understood the missing pieces of his own past. It wasn't easy for Joe. Facing my family brought up a lot of his own trauma, but telling the truth, finally sharing the burden he'd carried alone for so long, seemed to lift an immense weight from his shoulders. We didn't just listen and say goodbye. My family, we rallied around Joe. We found him temporary housing through a veterans support organization. We helped him navigate the complex process of getting the benefits he was entitled to, but had never accessed. We helped him reconnect with counselors who understood what he'd been through. It wasn't a magic fix. Decades of hardship and trauma don't disappear overnight, but it was a start. Joe started attending meetings, getting medical care. He even started talking about finding his own estranged family, and my family. We finally knew the real story of Sergeant Michael Carter, not just missing, but a hero who made the ultimate sacrifice. We contacted the military, armed with Joe's testimony. It was a long process, but eventually, they reviewed the case. My grandfather's record was amended. He received the posthumous honors he should have gotten 50 years earlier. It all started because I stopped, because I looked past the surface, because I noticed a faded patch on an old jacket worn by a man everyone else ignored. It taught me that everyone has a story. Everyone carries burdens we can't see, and sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to look closer, to listen, to show a little kindness, to change everything. That day, I didn't just find the truth about my grandfather. I found a friend in Joe, and I found a deeper understanding of compassion and the hidden connections that bind us all. We just need to be willing to see them. Thank you so much for listening to our story today. We hope it touched your heart. If it did, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps our channel grow, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had an encounter that changed your perspective? Share your story with us. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. And if you think this story might resonate with someone you know, please share it with them. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, take care, and remember to look closer.